Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another video on this channel for you guys on astrology. Today I want to talk a little bit about the Age of Aquarius and becoming a Uranian being and what that actually is all about. So we are currently in this transition phase from the Age of Pisces into the Age of Aquarius, and each astrological ages will cover a span of about 2,160 years. And I think more than ever before, with what's going on in the world right now with regards to the recent pandemic, as well as Saturn actually being in the sign of Aquarius, people are now really being triggered, especially those who are already in the astrological community, to really consider what steps to take next and how to best evolve in this time of crisis in the world. And so I'm gonna trace you guys back a little bit to the last stages of Aquarius that we've had on Earth and what was going on there, to kind of see the trends and the patterns that could maybe be repeating itself with the Age of Aquarius that's happening now. So as different astrologers will give you various different dates as to when the Age of Aquarius actually starts. Dane Rudyard says that it would probably start in about 2062, whereas Nicholas Campion has sampled over 90 different dates, and he's come to the conclusion that it's any time between the year 1447 to 3621. With keeping that in mind, I suppose we also have to keep in mind that it's not one particular year, but it's a shift. Just like anything else in astrology, things don't just suddenly happen. It's always this move or this transition into something else. And so with regards to the last two ages of Aquarius, let's talk a little bit about the one that happened about roughly 40,000 years ago. That was two cycles ago, two astrological age cycles ago, if we keep in mind the fact that each astrological age takes roughly 2,100 years, and if you times that by 24, we would get somewhere around 40,000, approximately little over 40,000 years ago. During that time in the world, we saw that there was a shift from the species of Neanderthal into the Cro-Magnon man. And so it was slowly the start of the extinction of the Neanderthals. The fossils that we've discovered around the 1800s with regards to this type of species of living being on Earth is very similar to that of the modern Homo sapien. They were considered to be so-called early Homo sapiens, as well as that there may be some remnants of this species of being within the current Homo sapiens as well. So what I'm taking from this era was that it was an evolution into the species of living beings on Earth in general. The evolution of the inhabitants of Earth in general. Now, if we look at the last Aquarian age, which would have happened around roughly 25,000 to 26,000 years ago, that was the time we had the last glacial maximum. This is not the last ice age, it's the last glacial maximum, meaning that the percentage of ice that was covering the Earth during the glacial period, which a large part of the Earth was a glacial period up until about 11,000 years ago, and now we're living in the interglacial period. So that 25,000 years ago, the last Aquarian age, that was the last glacial maximum, meaning that the ice was covering the Earth at its largest maximum percentage of ice coverage. So during that time, it had caused a major climate shift in the world. It has brought about drought, desertification, really big drop in sea levels, as well as there was a huge reduction in the number of population of human beings on Earth as they were dying out. A large part of them had to migrate to the southern European countries, as well as animals also had to go through a period of migration. And that age really affected both humans, animals, plants, and all living beings on the earth. So each Aquarian age points to specific cycles in the evolution of inhabitants on Earth. And it points out to the evolution that is needed at that particular point in order for to allow adaptation for survival on the Earth. So with regards to the Age of Aquarius coming around again at this time in the world, we're probably going to be experiencing something pretty similar, but there's one major difference, and I will talk about that in a bit. But the reason why the signs, shall we say, that the Aquarius age is approaching right now is clearer than ever is the fact that Aquarius is ruled by two planets, and that's Saturn and Uranus. And so we've got Saturn right now in the sign of Aquarius, and Uranus is in Taurus. But we're experiencing a Saturn-Uranus square going on currently as I'm making this video, as well as it will keep happening. Saturn is now currently at 0 degrees of Aquarius. It will retrograde back into Capricorn, so we will have a bit of an energy reversal feeling at that point, but it will continue to go back into Aquarius, and then we'll square Uranus, which is now at about 5 degrees of Taurus. And so Taurus and Aquarius naturally square each other on the zodiac wheel. So this is an energy of tensions, conflict. So this awareness that we're having this major shift is now going global, and that's why it's an important time in our history for this. But the reason why I say that this particular upcoming, currently happening Age of Aquarius is different from the ones previously had is because of how advanced the technology and the scientific discoveries we've made through the past 50 to 100 years, especially in terms of astronomy, with regards to the discovery of Uranus. With the last two Aquarian ages, we did not know, of course, we don't have astronomy or science, so we don't know about the planets that are, the fact that we are living in this solar system, right? But now we do. And on March 13 of 1781, Uranus was first discovered in the world. Could it be, guys, that the discovery of Uranus was actually this trigger of the start of the Aquarian age? I have made a bit of a discovery while I was looking at what's going on astrologically with regards to the date of the discovery of Uranus. And so when Uranus was discovered on March 13, 1781, at that time Uranus was in Gemini when it was discovered, and it was at about 24 degrees of Gemini. It was making an opposition to Saturn, which was in Sagittarius, at about 19 degrees. So, what's going on today in the world? We have a Uranus-Saturn square. During the discovery of Uranus, Uranus and Saturn were opposing each other. But more than that, at that year of the discovery of Uranus, the North Node was in Taurus at about 5 degrees. Right now, Uranus is in Taurus at approximately 5 degrees. So I kind of overlap these two charts together because the North Node is currently in Cancer, and it will be going into Gemini in May of 2020. So I drew up the chart of, around May 20th of 2020, because it's a beautiful number, just to kind of see what's happening astrologically in the sky at that point. And inside the circle in the blue, we have the date of the discovery of Uranus, while on the outside in red, the planets that are traveling outside the circle, that is the planets in the sky right now. So what we can see here is that Saturn, as I mentioned before, Saturn is going to square Uranus currently, as well as Saturn being in opposition to Uranus on the day that it was discovered. But what's more important than that is the fact that the North Node on May 20th of this year is going into Gemini. It will slowly move into Gemini. So in this date that we've got, it's at about 29 degrees of Gemini, which means that it's moving into a conjunction with the Uranus that was discovered in 1781. But also Uranus currently in May 20th this year is going to be at 7 degrees of Taurus, conjuncting the North Node in Taurus at 5 degrees of the date of the discovery of Uranus in 1781. So what this is really telling me is that, as you know, the North Node is really pointing to evolution of the soul growth. With regards to humanity and the collective, this is a really pivotal time in humanity for the collective to be getting in touch with their soul evolution, with an evolution of the soul. But what are we really evolving into? So I want to now introduce you guys to the Uranian being, because I think that is what we are being asked, triggered by the stars to evolve into at this point in humanity. And the signs are they've never been as clear as it is now, guys. I don't know if you guys have heard of human design, but I've been doing a bit of study into human design. I'm no expert on it. Briefly, human design is, it's a mapping of our body based on the different centers, and so it's a body graph basically that we get when we look at human design. It's based on your birth date, birth time, its birth location. It's like astrology, and it combines different systems such as astrology, the I Ching, the chakra system, the human genes, and so on and so forth. But what I found really interesting is that human design really emphasizes the year 1781 and the discovery of Uranus. Ra Uruhu, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct, the person who invented human design, states that 1781, the discovery of Uranus, brings human beings into this evolution of transition from what he termed the Saturnian being into the Uranian being. So the Saturnian being naturally has based on the theory of the 7 chakra centers in the body, but the Uranian being is based on the theory that there are 9 centers in the human body. The basic principle behind the Saturnian being is that the Saturnian being was necessary on Earth at a time when there was a lot of need for survival, where there was a lot of emphasis put into everyday life for forming strategies, building security, and having stability against external threats. That's very Saturnian in a sense. And that was necessary for our survival before 1781. As well as the Saturnian being's body lasts for about 15 to 30 years with regards to, in correspondence with the cycles of Saturn, because it was harder to, have knowledge of health and be cured of sickness at that point in time, as well as the body having to work extra lot more than the Uranian body. And therefore the Uranian being, the purpose of this transition into the Uranian being is that it is a being that no longer has to be based on survival, but it is about the nurturing and the flowering of consciousness. The main difference between the Uranian being and the Saturnian being is the new level of cognition. The lifespan of a Uranian being, as we can see right now in the world, is about 84 years, or 80-something years, in correspondence with the with the cycle of Uranus, and how fast it takes for Uranus to move around the zodiac wheel. So it's basically this transition into evolving human beings into a different kind of species altogether. And it may actually end the Homo sapiens way of life into the Uranian way of life. So now I want to talk a little bit about how we can actually be the Uranian being during this time in the world. And anybody can actually be a Uranian being, by the way, guys. You don't have to be an Aquarius, or you don't have to have a lot of planets in Aquarius, or have a strong Uranus, or have a strong 11th house, because that's going to defeat the purpose of the Aquarian age and Uranus, because Uranus views everybody as an equal. every human being is different in their own way, and therefore everybody is equal to each other. So it would only make sense that there's equal opportunity for everyone right now to become the Uranian being. And of course, with regards to astronomy, you know, when you see the planets in the solar system, Saturn is closer to the Sun, and as well as Earth, closer than Uranus. But Uranus is a step away from Saturn. So when you pass the orbit of Saturn, we reach the Uranus stage. As well as in astrology, with regards to the houses and the zodiac wheel, the signs, you know, Saturn rules the 10th house. Then after that, we have Aquarius, or the 11th house. So naturally, in order to become this Uranian being, we have to break away from the Saturnian way of life and the way of being. And I always think that Saturn is like our prison, because it represents limitations and restrictions, as we all know. But not like the 12th house kind. It's a prison that surrounds us with the limits of societal norms. And there are, I would say, 3 ways that we can work with the Saturnian prison. So the first way is by not being aware of the fact that we are in a Saturnian prison. We all were born to be in this prison in one way or another, meaning that we are not aware that we are living our lives, and also in our mindset, in our perception of the world, on what the society deems as normal or appropriate. That's the first way. The second way we work with this is that some of us may be aware that we are in a prison of societal norms, expectations, appropriations, but we're not going to do anything about it. Because why do we have to do anything about it? There's no push for us to do anything about it. Life is okay as is. But guys, it is not. And I think you guys know this more than at any other time in the world, that it is not okay right now to be living within the confines of what the society deems normal anymore. And this can be in terms of the economy, the infrastructure, you know, the careers that we have, you know, all those things. And so the third way that we can work with this is, of course, to be aware that we are in a prison. Awareness is key, but also the willpower to break out of the prison, to break out of the societal norms and what is appropriate, and step into the authentic Uranian being that we're supposed to be, one that operates on cognition and higher consciousness. And so when we look at the astrological wheel, the 12 houses, the 12 houses represents different eras of our life, right? So I would consider that with our journey through the natal chart wheel through life, we can either live each house, each area of life as a Saturnian being, but we can also live each area of life as a Uranian being. And if we were to live it according to the Uranian being, we would be in touch with the soul growth of the collective, as with regards to what I mentioned earlier about the transits that's going on, that will be happening in the sky. And this is actually a theory that's coming from esoteric astrology. I love to study esoteric astrology. If you guys are into that, you can totally look it up. It's very interesting. And esoteric astrology talks about the soul, interpreting astrology from the perspective of the highest level of the soul rather than the personality. And so this really much fits with the soul intention, the intention that we should be setting for our souls in this age of Aquarius. And so now I want to walk you guys through the 2 different levels of how you can live each area of your life, the Saturnian or the Uranian being. So with regards to Aries in the 1st house, if you are living this in the Saturnian being, this means being aware of your physical body, caring for the physical body, as well as being independent, doing things your own way, knowing who you are, yourself, and your ego. And of course, we have to be aware that we need to do this, but then we need to also, but then it would also be a good idea to step into the Uranian being part of it, which means we take the 1st house to the Uranian being level, we see that there is an awareness of a sensing, an instinctual sensing of the new paradigms, and having the will to push through any obstacles or inertia that could be pulling us back from adopting the new paradigms that is necessary for this age in the world. With regards to the second house, if we're working with it from the Saturnian being, this is about money, being self-sufficient, the things that we value, as well as our sensual pleasures. If we take this up a notch to the Uranian being, this is an area of life that can recognize the spirit and the divinity behind all material forms, all forms of things. The recognizing the divinity that lies behind social norms, behind anything that is mainstream that we see, on a daily basis, and it's about revealing the light behind that. And ultimately, this is about illumination. Being able to see beyond what's there in front of us to the soul of that thing. This is very powerful, actually. This Taurus and second house energy is actually very powerful to the soul, because if we can't see in the first place, if we can't see the prison, and why we are being put into the prison of Saturn, we can't break out of it. So it's very important when we reach the Uranian being level of the second house. The third house and the Gemini archetype, this area of life is on a Saturnian being level, is of course communication, our immediate environment, languages, the media, short distance travels. But at the Uranian being level, it is about not the mind anymore, but the soul. It is about how to quiet the mind so that the soul has a place to live. Quieting the mind so we can hear the messages of the soul. And therefore, it's the understanding of duality, mind and soul, this self and the higher self, the duality that needs to exist together. The fourth house and the Cancer archetype, when we're operating from the Saturnian level of being, is about the home, our memories of the past, the unconscious mind. But when operating from the Uranian level of being, it is about creating a foundation for other people in our lives with love. Through the act of love, one acts as a support for the people around us to grow. It is about creating and nurturing a real foundation, not a false foundation, not a corrupted foundation, but a real foundation that is actually made of nurture and love, of loving wisdom. The fifth house and the Leo archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level being, is about our hobbies, self-expression, creativity, children, taking a risk, businesses and ventures. But when operating from the Uranian level of being, this is about the will to just be. Yeah, just being. It's not about doing, it's not about creating, it is about being. Because in that being, that is already you. The discovery of yourself, to know who you really are, means that you don't have to do anything. It means that you are just you. You are not your name. You are not, I'm not Tan, I just am. And the authentic self-expression that can really come from this house is about the self as the soul. Not the self as the personality, but the self as the soul. Whatever you create, if it's from the soul, it's going to be authentic. The sixth house in the Virgo archetype, if you're operating from the Saturnian level being, is of course about health, daily work, routines. It's a perfectionistic house, perfecting craftsmanship. When you're operating with this from the Uranian level being, this house is about purification of the form so that the higher self can come through. It is the understanding that God, whatever God might mean for you, did not create us, but it is the fact that God is the creation itself. So therefore you are the creation itself. The God that you may see all around you in everything around you is actually all a part of you. It's the understanding of the cosmic mother and the child, and therefore, with regards to this understanding, there's, as a mother, you have something to give to humanity. You're at the correct service to humanity. The 7th house and the Libra archetype, operating from the Saturnian level of being, is of course about relationships, one-to-one relationships, marriage, contracts, maybe the shadow side. Operated from the Uranian being. This is really interesting. It's still about relationships, but it's about the right relationship, the correct relationship between everything that we don't actually ever consider. It's about the relationship between you and me, but also the relationship between me and Mother Nature, the relationship between me and my career, the relationship between me and money, the relationship between me, my lower self, and my higher self, the relationship between the masculine and the feminine inside, the relationship between the mind and the heart. So the 8th house and the Scorpio archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level of being, is of course, as we all know, it's about shared resources, joint finances, as well as transformation of all kinds, death and sex, rebirth. When operated from the Uranian level of being, it is about the understanding that in order to get to your higher self and the light, when you are aware of the fact that you want to reach a higher level of being, your monsters, the devils inside of you, are going to start coming out, and they are going to hold you back from that. And you're not going to be able to repress it or deny it or even project it. All you have to do is surrender to what is necessary. You can't even fight it. You have to accept it. Meeting the pain where it is, being flexible, yielding to the monsters, being humble, humility is what is required to overcome these devils and monsters. The 9th house and the Sagittarius archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level of being, is about, long distance travels, higher education, philosophies, belief systems, your visions of life. When operating from the Uranian level of being, it is about vision, definitely still about the vision, but it's actually about commitment. It is not a restless place like you would think. It is about commitment to a single vision and a goal. So the 10th house and the Capricorn archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level of being, is, about our calling in life, our careers, and what we want to achieve, and our reputation. But from the Uranian level of being, it is about spiritual initiation. This is the peak of the height of your highest self. But when you get to that place at the top, it's about looking down below and seeing that you are not on the mountain, but you are the mountain, and you have your feet firmly on the ground, and therefore you have something to give back to the world. You have to spiritually initiate everybody else who is still hasn't climbed to the top of their mountain yet. The 11th house and the Aquarius archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level of being, is about, groups and communities, our hopes and wishes in life, friends, the collective consciousness. When operating from the Uranian level of being, it is about unifying of diversity. It is about unifying the mainstream with things that are on the fringe of society, with the new paradigm. It's kind of like that first house Aries archetype, but that was about seeing the new paradigm. This is about unifying the new paradigm with what is mainstream. It is not about completely rebelling against the mainstream. When you do that, that is when we have a separation. And that is when we have conflict and war. but the unification of, oh, how can we take something that is new, that is maybe a bit taboo, that is maybe weird, eccentric, too progressive. How can we bring that into the mainstream? That is the unification of diversity. The 12th house in the Pisces archetype, when operating from the Saturnian level of being, is about escapism, isolation, art, connection with spirituality and the divine. When it's operating from the level of the Uranian being, it is about sacrificial love without sacrificing the self. So it's really easy to access the love nature within the 12th house and the Piscean type of archetype, but it's not about accessing that love. It is about going deeper than that love. If you think about the ocean, that's like Pisces. The ocean is really deep. It's about really going as far as you can go beyond the love that you know in your nature you have, to the Father within yourself. And therefore, when you are wanting to give love to the world, because there's a need here to save those who are suffering with this archetype. In order to save those in the world, there has to be a direction. You have to set boundaries. And in order to do that, the recognition that you don't just have the mother within, but you also have the father within, that brings real fulfillment, real wholeness, and abundance. The abundance within will allow you to know the right way to offer sacrificial love without sacrificing the self. So I think that's it for today, guys. That's my interpretation of the Aquarius, the Age of Aquarius, and how to become the Uranian being. I hope that kind of made sense. And what do you guys think about this? If you want to comment below and let us know what your thoughts are, I would love to read them. I may not be able to reply all the comments, but I definitely read all of them. The last thing I want to say here, guys, is that this is a really important time, I think, in our collective awareness and our consciousness in history in general. And because like I talked about in the video, that we now have more access to technology, to the understanding of astronomy than we have ever had before. And we no longer are in that stage where we need to struggle to survive. We have to really think about why we are still living as a Saturnian being and how we're going to transition into the Uranian being. So I'll leave it there, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. I do birth chart readings as well as synastry relationship readings. You can check out more information on my website. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Beautiful Uranian beings. Bye!